On today's show, we're going to discuss the most important usage nuggets from preseason week 1. Our research team charted first team usage for all the games. Anyone who says preseason usage is meaningless just doesn't really understand what they're talking about, in my opinion. Of course, some of it is meaningless, and we'll talk about that. It's about knowing what actually matters. We'll also talk about the latest injury news around the league, which is significant, and changes Evan has made to his top 150. We are recording this Wednesday, August 14th at around 4 p.m. Eastern time. It has been an awful day for the Minnesota Vikings. We find out that JJ McCarthy needed the full-blown meniscus repair, which means he is out for the season. For more details on what that means, you can listen to the show with Stefania Bell from Tuesday. Bottom line, Evan, JJ McCarthy is out for the season. Sam Darnold, Evan's boy, is now ticketed to start, if he can play well and if he can stay healthy, is now ticketed to start 17 games for the Vikings. Obviously, it's unlikely anyone actually plays 17 games in the NFL, but he's at least ticketed to do so now. Evan, your initial reactions to JJ McCarthy being out for the season?
Well, I'll tell you what, one of the biggest question marks that people had about JJ McCarthy coming out of Michigan, because his sample size was so small, coming out as a redshirt sophomore who didn't throw the ball voluminously in Jim Harbaugh's offense, was, did he have NFL caliber ability? And the good news here, if there is a silver lining, is that I believe he answered those questions. He looked tremendous in the Vikings in his first preseason appearance, and by all accounts was having a really nice training camp after a rough start. So I think that he answered some of the questions about his ability, and I think that he still has a very fair chance to be the Vikings quarterback of the future. But now we're in Sam Darnold SZN. Unfortunately, the Vikings get back into practice after that preseason game, and they have like the practice from hell. Jordan Addison, I believe, got carted off the field. We don't know the extent of his injury yet. TJ Hawkinson is still on the PUP. And apparently Sam Darnold had a horrible practice. Like, the Browns defense was just teeing off on him. At one point, somebody on the Browns sideline goes, "He's 1 for 12." I mean, they're heckling Sam Darnold out here, seeing ghosts on the training camp practice field. None of that matters, but it is a reminder that Sam Darnold can be very volatile as a player.
Yeah.
I actually think a fair comparison for him as a player is Jameis Winston, because he can do special things on the football field, and he can also just absolutely rip your soul out with mistakes, because he's kind of little head stuff going on with Sam Darnold. But I mean, I think he becomes an intriguing back end quarterback too, with upside, because of the supporting cast, because of the offense, because of the environment in Minnesota, playing tons of games indoors. But part of that is having Jordan Addison. So that's obviously an injury to watch.
We don't want to speculate on Jordan Addison's injury. He did hop to the cart. It wasn't like they crowded around him on the field and they brought the cart out and lifted him. He hopped to the cart. So, we're not going to speculate on that. I do think it matters a ton. You need Hawkinson and Addison out there if you're Sam Darnold. Our initial, and this was when Addison was healthy, our initial ranking on Darnold came in around QB 20, QB 21. I feel pretty good about that. And people are like, what are you talking about? Sam Darnold, QB 20, 21. Remember Josh Dobbs last year? They traded for him the week of the game. He comes in off the bench after Kirk Cousins got hurt, 27 DraftKings points. Then Josh Dobbs had a 25-point game, a 19-point game, an 8-point game, and then he got benched the following game after that. Nick Mullins comes in. He has 22 DraftKings points, 23 DraftKings points, 25 DraftKings points. I don't think Sam Darnold's good. He's going to be wildly inconsistent. He's better than Nick Mullins and Josh Dobbs, right? I mean, he's better than Nick Mullins and Josh Dobbs. So my point is that in this system, which is arguably the best possible system for a pocket passer, Sam Darnold's going to produce and have good games. He's going to project well for us week 1. I believe they play at the Giants. Like, I know he's going to project well for us in week 1. So, my main concern on Evans Addison love, especially on Evans Darnold love, especially in best ball, was I did not want to show up in week 16, 17, 18 and take a 0 from Sam Darnold. If Sam Darnold plays well now and he's healthy, he will be out there in week 16, 17, 18. So clearly in play in everything now. Best ball, redraft, super flex, everything.
Yeah, one name that people need to keep in mind too, and let's say that Jordan Addison, this is a serious injury for Jordan Addison, or it's not, and he gets hurt at some point during the season, is Jalen Nailor.
Yep.
Former 6th-round pick of the Vikings out of Michigan State. didn't get on the field a whole lot his first 2 seasons, but he's seemingly locked himself into the third receiver job in Minnesota. Sam Sherman, who's works for ETR, is also basically a ship chaser at this point, has been really pushing Jalen Naylor as his favorite sleeper. Even went into our private Slack today and put a tweet, a fake tweet that said that Jordan Addison has torn his ACL. These imposters out here. I don't blame Sam Sherman for that. He's in his 20s or something. I blame his generation, because his generation is all about like censorship. Like, if you see somebody that you disagree with, let's wipe them off the internet. Let's wipe them off the face of the earth. But also like doesn't vet sources. I think it's a generational issue. Shout out to Sam Sherman, great analyst, but of that generation.
I just think he's so excited to try to be right on this Jalen Naylor thing that he got.
Exactly,
you know what I mean?
Exactly what it is.
Okay. Oh, man. Story number 2 to get to is another bad one. Marquise Brown, Hollywood, fake Hollywood himself, SC joint dislocation out 4 to 6 weeks. Talked about this on Market Monday. Also talked with Stefania Bell about this on Tuesday. So you guys have gotten a lot of my takes on the Marquise Brown situation. Since it actually happened, we've gotten a 4 to 6 week timetable on Marquise Brown. Evan, sounds like he should be fine once he returns. We're probably looking at sometime week 1, week 2, week 3, but he's not going to be able to practice in the meantime at all. So, Evan, what kind of moves did you make in the top 150 among Chiefs wide receivers, and what do you think going forward?
Just, pretty well. I made 3 moves. Obviously, I moved Marquise Brown down into a spot where I'm still very willing to draft him, but I'm expecting him to miss at least 2 games. And yeah, according to reports, from like Twitter doctors, this is supposed to be a smooth recovery, but it's still like, man, my receiver's going into the season with a shoulder problem. He's 5'9", 166. He's got a history of injuries. So it's unsettling, but still, the reports on his instant chemistry with Patrick Mahomes in training camp are really promising. And the way that he plays, I think, really suits the way that Patrick Mahomes is capable of playing. So I'm not afraid to draft him. I moved Rashee Rice way up. Mm-hmm. I had him at wide receiver 31, moved him up to like wide receiver 22. It wasn't just because of this. I think that as we get closer to the season, it's become more and more apparent that he is either not going to be suspended or the suspension is going to be really, really small. And, I think he absolutely belongs in the low-end wide receiver 2 range. He's got low-end wide receiver 1 upside, especially now that he's going to start the season without this added target competition. Rashee Rice is a guy that I want to draft like aggressively now, and now I think I have him in a position. I moved up Xavier Worthy a little bit. I felt like I was already pretty aggressive on him, and I want to stay aggressive on him. I think that the Chiefs' passing game as an entity is in very clear position to be able to bounce back after a really rough season that was largely caused by the talent that they do not have, the talent deficiencies that they no longer have. Like, they have talent in the pass catcher core now.
Could not be in agreement more with Evan on all those Chief takes. Rashee Rice clearly a smash. Evan has him up to 34 overall. I like being aggressive there on Rashee Rice. Evan is up to 60 overall on Xavier Worthy. I like being aggressive on him. Marquise Brown, 73rd overall for Evan. And that's probably going to be a little bit above ADP now that people panic about this injury. But again, missed games early in the season are way, way, way more easier for us to stomach than missed games late in the season, and still like Hollywood Brown plenty there. Let's go to, let's go to this Keenan Allen fat story. So third story we're going to get to here, Keenan Allen. There's like a very small line, like a tiny line in this Albert Breer report from Bears camp where he's talking about guys' weights. And he says, he just drops it, casually, Keenan Allen's 230 pounds. And then fantasy Twitter loses their mind because Keenan Allen came out of college at 206. Keenan Allen's now old and fat. My initial take was, it's a throwaway line. He probably has been way 230. It's not that big a deal. But then people started being like, watch the Hard Knocks. He got owned by Jalen Johnson. Watch the preseason game. He looks fat and slow. I don't know, man. I didn't think we should make any moves on this Keenan Allen stuff, but I'll tell you what we ended up doing here in a second. Evan, what was your reaction to the Keenan Allen weighs 230 pounds now?
Well, first of all, to respond to the Hard Knocks thing and the first preseason game, Jalen Johnson owns a lot of people. I mean,
Yeah.
he's like a top 5 cornerback in the NFL. So I don't think that that's a huge concern. Also, Keenan Allen being such a high percentage slot player, like isn't going to have to go against corners like Jalen Johnson during the regular season very often. And the other thing, he looks slow. Keenan Allen has never been fast.
Right.
He ran 4.7 coming out of Cal. He also weighed 206 pounds coming out of Cal. So if he's really 230, I mean, that's a pretty significant. Now, it's been 10 years or whatever.
Exactly.
And everybody that goes from age 23 to 33, is going to gain 25 pounds at least along the way, but not necessarily professional athletes.
Yeah.
I kind of don't buy it. And I talked to Albert Breer and I asked him, is this real? And he said, yes. And it's the Bears portraying it as a positive in the context of their receiver core. They have one of the biggest receiver cores in the league. I still tend to doubt that he weighs 230 pounds. I think people are kind of looking for reasons to not like Keenan Allen in fantasy to an extent, because this is not really a story elsewhere on the internet. This is just this has become a fantasy story.
Yep.
No one else cares about this. I think that people are looking for reasons to really like Rome Odunze and not as much like Keenan Allen, and that's why we're running with it.
100%. That is 100% what's going on. I love Rome Odunze. And I'm guilty of this too. Like, why take Keenan Allen when I can take Rome Odunze 4 rounds later? In the preseason game, I should note that the usage for Keenan was way better than it was for Rome. Keenan was out there in 2 wide receiver sets, not Rome. And so, at least initially, I think Keenan is going to have that job. I still like Keenan. We did dock a 0.5% on base target share from Keenan, not because of the fat thing as much, but just generally like want to be high on Rome. And, there's some age decline risk, and also Harmon had Keenan as his most overrated receiver when we did the show on him also. So, I still am totally fine with Keenan for sure. All right. Christian Kirk, let's get into some preseason usage here for story number 4. Christian Kirk was not in 2 wide receiver sets for Jacksonville. It was Gabe Davis, the two newcomers, Gabe Davis and Brian Thomas Jr., who got every snap with Trevor Lawrence. They were in a 3 wide receiver set. I believe it was 9 out of their 11 snaps, but those 2 that they went 2 wide receiver in, Christian Kirk was not in. I think 2 things I want to talk about here. First, Christian Kirk was going to have the same role last year. And then they had a bunch of injuries, right? Zay Jones got hurt, and we saw Christian Kirk start to play really well when he was in those 2 wide receiver sets. The other thing that I want to say is maybe it's not a surprise, but it's just good to see Brian Thomas Jr., who hasn't gotten like a ton of camp buzz, be out there for every snap with Trevor Lawrence. Because like they have some guys who can play. Parker Washington can play, and they didn't rotate. They just immediately, first preseason game, Brian Thomas, every snap with Trevor Lawrence. I thought that was notable. It's good for us. We've been way higher than marking on Brian Thomas for a lot of the summer. Evan, what do you think about Christian Kirk and then Brian Thomas?
Yeah, and I moved up Brian Thomas after that. I think at the end of the day, it is not going to matter very much for Christian Kirk because this is a team that last year played a lot of 2 tight end sets. Luke Farrell played too much. They had problems on the offensive line. Evan Ingram isn't a blocker at all, so we kind of needed that extra blocker on the field. This year, I mean, they gave a bunch of money to Gabe Davis, 3 years, $39 million. They used the 21st overall pick on Brian Thomas, and Christian Kirk's their best receiver. They're going to be much more of a 3 receiver, 11 personnel team this year, I think. Also, the offense hasn't changed. Like, it's still Doug Peterson. It's Press Taylor, his boy, running the show. And so I don't think that there's going to be I do think they're going to run more 11 and 11 personnel, but nothing changed in the coaching staff. They're just as aware as we are that Christian Kirk is the player that Trevor Lawrence is most comfortable throwing the football to. Gabe Davis is new. Brian Thomas is new. Those guys are going to be out there, but it's going to be Christian Kirk in the slot all year. I think he'll end up playing 70+% of the snaps. And if you look at his pace, because he missed like the last 5 games of last season, I mean, he was on pace for well over 80 catches, 1,000 yards. before he went down. I mean, I don't think he's a big upside player,
Yeah.
but I'm not really concerned about this this first preseason game or anything for him.
Yeah, I think that's fair. On Christian Kirk, I agree with you. Like he's not going to blow the doors off, but in a home league, like if he goes in the 6th round or something like that, it's just Christian Kirk is just going to be solid. I agree that maybe the upside where he can get a lot of 20 and 30-point fantasy games may not be there for these large field tournaments and best ball and stuff like that. On Brian Thomas, Evan is up to 120 overall in his top 150. On Brian Thomas, you'll notice the ETR top 300s are way higher than that on Brian Thomas. A lot of that is just being higher on Jacksonville pass game in general and a bounce back for Trevor Lawrence, and B, back weighted production. Just like down the stretch, we expect Brian Thomas to be taking over here as perhaps the alpha. So yeah, but we're high on both. I mean, we're reasonably high on Kirk and Brian Thomas. All right. Let's go to the Texans stuff. So this was the first look we got with Steph Diggs in a Texans uniform. They did play starters. Tank Dell was not in there for 2 wide receiver sets. The 2 wide receiver set they opened the game with was Stephon Diggs and, of course, Nico Collins. Now, last year, the Texans were 23rd in 3 wide receiver sets, only 61% of the time. I expect that to rise sharply this year, given they added Diggs, year 2 of CJ Stroud. They should be throwing it way more. They should be in 3 wide receiver sets way more. Dell also goes out, of course, and scores a touchdown, breaks a couple tackles, looked awesome, of course. So I don't know if there's a lot of moves to make here, Evan. I just thought it was interesting to get a look at the Texans as they lined up with their starters. Any thoughts on Texans stuff?
Yeah, and I think that this was anticipated that at least begin the season that Steph Diggs would be in the 2 receiver package with Nico Collins, and Tank Dell would be kind of third technically in line because number one, Tank Dell, I mean, he's going to be used on returns, and he's coming off the broken leg. Although, man, he is showing no signs of any lingering concern stemming from that broken leg. And then he rips a 34-yard touchdown right off the bat, and it's like, is it even going to matter that Steph Diggs is going to play more snaps? And right now I have Steph Diggs a little bit higher than Tank Dell, just almost purely based on the fact that I expect him to play more snaps. But at the end of the day, like Tank Dell has way more big playability, so I'm starting to question, should I flip those?
Yeah, that's been a tough one for me. Evan has them 37 Diggs and 40 overall on Tank Dell. I would have it similar. I would have like Diggs 1 spot or 2 spots ahead, but very, very close to each other. And yeah, I just love Tank Dell, man. Guy is such a baller. I mean, if they were going to play 2 wide receiver sets with Nico and Tank Dell this year, let's say the Diggs thing never happened. I mean, then you could justify taking Tank Dell in like round 2. But yeah. All right. Let's go to the Broncos. So Bo Nix makes his NFL debut. He didn't start. He will start the second preseason game. We still think Bo Nix is going to make all or almost all of the starts for the Broncos this year, health permitting. Bo Nix goes 15 of 21 for 125 yards, 1 touchdown, no interceptions. I actually been taking a ton of Bo Nix because I tack on a third quarterback on the DK best ball stuff a ton. And so I take a ton of Bo Nix. So I watched every Bo Nix throw. First 2 throws were like real shaky. I mean, almost got picked off. Were like 2 really bad throws. After that, I thought he settled in and was pretty good. Now, it was a lot of quick outs, a lot of hitches. People are going to say he didn't push the ball down the field. That's kind of like the way I think Sean Payton's offenses kind of want to work anyways. So, and also Bo Nix showed good mobility. He had 2 runs. If you go to my Twitter, we clipped together the 2 interesting runs that he had. He has more mobility than I think people realize. Scored a ton of rushing touchdowns in college during his long 6 years or whatever it was there in college. So I was actually encouraged by Bo Nix's debut. I know like the tape bros don't love kind of that check down style that he's probably going to play, but I actually thought it was encouraging the way he played overall. Evan, what'd you think of Bo Nix's debut?
Yeah, it's going to be a quick game offense. Bo Nix can absolutely execute that. I think you're definitely right about him having more mobility than is kind of commonly perceived. The comparison that I've always had is Teddy Bridgewater when he played for the Saints under Sean Payton. And I think that Bo Nix can run a little bit better than Teddy did. So I think that that's kind of what you're getting. My biggest concern, because I was trying to be optimistic on Marvin Mims.
Yeah.
Marvin Mims had a high yards per route run as a rookie, but couldn't consistently get on the field. He was a player that the Broncos traded up to draft. in the second round. He's the first pick of the Sean Payton Broncos head coaching regime. And he's still like, well, he was on the field for the first snap of the game, I believe.
Yeah, so
But,
weird.
but then he started, but then he, like, when he came back in, then he was like the number 4 behind Cortland Sutton, Tim Patrick. Cortland Sutton and Tim Patrick were like the clear
Yeah,
one and 2. And then even Josh Reynolds. So Josh Reynolds, they gave money to.
yeah.
So that's a concern for me right now. Marvin Mims, I had to move him down in the rankings, but I think that Bo Nix has positioned himself, and he didn't start this game, but I think he's going to end up being the Broncos' Week 1 starter.
Yeah, it was so weird. Marvin Mims played the first snap and everything. We'll see how it goes going forward. Maybe they wanted to get Mims work with Bo Nix. Who knows? We'll see. But agree with you. I did not think Tim Patrick would be back this fast and be starting and being healthy this fast. And that was part of the optimism. That was part of the thesis on Marvin Mims and Troy Franklin and guys like that, is that Tim Patrick just is too hurt to play. Doesn't look like that's the case. Josh Reynolds comes in. He plays a million. And we know Cortland Sutton's going to play. So it's getting messier. I think we'll see a rotation there with Denver's receivers, but it's going to be messy. Speaking of rotation, Evan made a running back move with the Broncos in his rankings, moved Javonte Williams up from RB24 to RB21. Evan, maybe you can explain a little bit more to the people about the move you made on Javonte Williams.
Well, I've kind of had a little bit of bias toward Audric Estime, a player who I really believed in coming out of college, loved him in college. I think got a bad rap because he ran a slow 40 time at the combine, but all his other athletic measurables were really good. And then he ran like 4.56 at his pro day. So I think he's kind of gotten a bum rap. But I mean, you can't go into your first preseason game, fumble it, and then it's returned for a touchdown. And then Sean Payton talked about that after the game. That is that's a one-way ticket into the doghouse. If not, like, they're trying to find a way to stash you on IR or something. You know, he already had the little knee surgery. I mean, obviously he's back now, but they could find a way to stash him on some sort of a list. I think that it is Javonte Williams now clearly as the number 1 back in Denver. Apparently he has remade his body. We have to remember that, he was highly inefficient last year, but he was coming off a major knee surgery at the time. And they still were like trying to force feed him touches and use him as a volume back. Now he's probably better positioned from a physical conditioning standpoint to handle that volume and be efficient with it. Jaleel McLaughlin is going to have his role, but he's 180 pounds. And Samaje Perine is still like the third down back.
Yeah.
I'm much more willing to draft Javonte Williams right now than I was at the start of training camp.
Okay, so I think a lot of this correlates to how good you think Bo Nix is going to be. If you think him and the Broncos are going to be bad, it's hard for me to see it on Javonte Williams because I do think this will be a 3-way backfield. Samaje Perine played the third down snaps with the first unit. McLaughlin's going to get his, Sproulsian type role. What does that really leave for Javonte Williams if this team is bad? If this team is average or good, then you have like a 2-down role like Joe Mixon had or something like that with the Bengals where it can be profitable. So yeah, Evans up to 72 overall on Javonte Williams. I'd probably be a little bit lower than that personally on the risk this team is bad and he splits the backfield 3 ways, but totally agree that all the Javonte Williams FUD was just absolutely ridiculous. Like ridiculous. Sean Payton even talked about how he didn't expect a lot out of Javonte Williams in his first year back. Expects him to look much, much better this year and has transformed his body, like Evan said. It wasn't like the Breece Hall ACL tear that was clean. Javonte Williams' ACL tear was very complicated, multi-ligament tear. All right. Let's go to Chargers backfield. So Daniel Popper does a great job for The Athletic covering the Chargers. He did a roster preview and he left Kimoni Vidal off of his roster projection. That raised eyebrows in the fantasy community because, as everyone knows, Gus Edwards and J.K. Dobbins are very susceptible to someone coming in and stealing their work on what we expect to be a run-heavy team. I don't know, man. Like, Jared Patterson is going to be their third running back. Jared Patterson's been cut twice by the Commanders, if I recall correctly. I still think Kimoni Vidal has a good chance to make this team. He needs to get on the field. I believe he's been dealing with a hamstring injury. He needs to get on the field and prove it. But if he can prove it, I still think he's in the mix here. But yeah, Evan, any more thoughts on Chargers backfield?
I had Kimoni Vidal like right at number 150 overall, and I kind of forced him out. Dude, sometimes we just got to remember, like, I know that there's legitimate reason for a little bit of hype on Kimoni Vidal. This depth chart is wide open for the Chargers. We know that they're going to have a success running the ball as a team under Jim Harbaugh and Greg Roman with this offensive line. By the way, Joe Alt looked awesome in his first preseason game, just blocking out the sun as a run blocker. We know that they're going to have team success from a rushing standpoint, but who are going to be the individual actors in the backfield? And I mean, there was a case for Kimoni Vidal. I think that he's obviously not stood out, and therefore, 6th-round pick, like they could probably easily just put him on the practice squad.
Yeah.
And that's something if he gets beat out, like this is a brand new regime. Everything is up for grabs. If Jared Patterson, who was extremely productive in his college career, he's a nondescript talent, but he has a track record of a lot of rushing production from college. If he's beating him out in the practice field, like Jim Harbaugh isn't going to be like, oh, well, it doesn't matter. We're going to go with Kimoni Vidal. Like Kimoni Vidal is a 6th-round pick. Okay,
Exactly.
he's competing for a roster spot first and foremost.
Yeah, and I had talked a lot about Kimoni Vidal being a bad best ball pick because you just can't take zeros. In redraft, I was way more willing to take shots on this, and I still think it's worth a shot in deep leagues on guys like Dobbins and Vidal. But especially after talking to Stefania about Dobbins, I think the most likely scenario here is just a ton of rotation. I don't think the Chargers can count on J.K. Dobbins for 15, 20 touches. They can give him 10, then give Gus Edwards 10, then give Patterson and Vidal a little bit and just see what happens, So I think that's the way it's going to play out. Breaking news in the show. We have good news, Evan. Breaking news in the show from Matthew Collier, who I believe covers the Vikings for ESPN. Update on Jordan Addison. Injured his ankle, unlikely to practice tomorrow, but KOC does not believe it is a serious injury. So these things at camp, guys get on a cart because the training room is far away. We can't keep being like, he's carted off. Everybody panic, right. Sounds like Addison's going to be okay. So
Sam Darnold, SZN is back on.
All right. Let's go to 10th story here. Austin Ekeler. I was just watching the usage between Ekeler and Brian Robinson during the Jaden Daniels snaps. Austin Ekeler got all 3 third down snaps, 5 total. Brian Robinson got 6 snaps, no third downs. So kind of as expected. If you think Austin Ekeler, all his demise last year was injury related, not decline related, which I'm sure there's a mix there. Austin Ekeler is an interesting guy who can catch passes very well and can score touchdowns from the goal line, as we've seen. It's not the cleanest spot with a rushing quarterback and Brian Robinson's presence, but I did want to note that. So I'm curious what you think about the Ekeler B-Rob stuff, Evan, and also your take on Jaden Daniels' NFL debut.
Yeah, so we didn't see a lot from Jaden Daniels. I mean, you were saying before the show, I think 3 completions. I didn't look at the stats. I just looked at the plays.
Yeah.
He hit De'Ami Brown for a deep shot off of like an improvised play. Apparently that was not how the play was drawn up. But I think that that's something that could instill confidence from the coaching staff, and just nice to see that in Jaden Daniels' bag at the, some version of the NFL level, because but we saw that from him a lot at LSU, throwing the football down the field down to Brian Thomas and leading all of NCAA in yards per pass attempt. He's oozing big play ability, and you like to see him looking down the field aggressively and finding a guy, De'Ami Brown, for that play that on an out of structure play.
Mm-hmm. Any thoughts on? By the way, Evan has Jaden Daniels at 105, right just behind Dak and Caleb Williams. So Jaden Daniels' ADP is rising. Like drafts I've been doing, people are starting to take him in the 80s and stuff now after they saw that preseason game. And I should note, he did score a rushing touchdown. He only attempted 3 passes in this game. They got down to the 3-yard line, and he ends up running one in. So that's going to spike his ADP even more. But yeah, I think in a home league, if I'm waiting on quarterback, the last one I would get is Jaden Daniels before I was like, you know what, it's gone too far. So Jaden Daniels is our QB12. That's where I would cut it off.
But yeah, as for the backfield, I don't have any breathtaking comments. I just think it's very clear that Brian Robinson is going to be the early down pounder, and Austin Ekeler is going to be the change of pace scat back, passing game specialist. I don't think there's been anything to change that.
Agreed. And, the way Evan has it is probably how I would have it too. Brian Robinson, 109 overall. Austin Ekeler, 115 overall. One other note on Commanders. I know people were excited for Luke McCaffrey. He got no looks with the first group, and it was doubly bad for McCaffrey because Jahan Dotson played in the slot. And that was not something that previously had been something the Commanders did a lot of. Jahan Dotson going to the slot allows them to play Terry McLaurin and De'Ami Brown on the outside. And I think it's a good thing for Dotson. So the Jaden Daniels Dotson stacks are very cheap, or at least were very cheap. And I think those were interesting for sure. But yeah, let me see where Evan has Dotson at. It's not like an exciting play. Yeah, Evan has Dotson at 126. I don't think it's like super exciting, but I think the slot role gives him a bit more upside and floor than he did previously.
I've drafted him a little bit.
Yeah.
I kind of like him being in the slot. But yeah, I have no early impact expectations for Luke McCaffrey. At the end of the day, I know he's got a big name and all that, and he's, some people like him. He's a third-round rookie receiver. Those guys, that profile doesn't typically lend itself to early career success or success at all. He's competing with De'Ami Brown, who you mentioned, Olamide Zaccheaus. Jamison Crowder is in Washington. So, it's not – these guys aren't stars or anything like that, but they all have, like, NFL experience, and Luke McCaffrey obviously does not.
Let's get to the Bears. I'm curious your take on Caleb Williams' debut. Bears will let him play a lot in this game, and then there was some very weird tight end usage. Gerald Everett played 14 snaps with the starters. Cole Kmet only played 11. Gerald Everett ran 6 routes. Cole Kmet only ran 4 routes. Really weird stuff. Now we know. Well, first I'll get the Caleb Williams take. Caleb Williams played 20 snaps in this game. Evan, what did you think of Caleb Williams' NFL debut?
He looked awesome.
Yeah.
I think he's going to be awesome. Like when I watched him play in college, I remember him when he came in for Spencer Rattler at Oklahoma, and immediately, like he was like a Heisman contender. That was a year where there was no clear Heisman front runner, and like as a freshman at Oklahoma, he was a Heisman contender. Goes to USC, wins the Heisman. Last year, surrounded by absolute dust at USC, was still extremely dynamic. Had a number of bad moments because of the dust around him, but I think he's going to be an absolute star. I love how he hung in the pocket. I love how he, wasn't always trying to make improvisational plays. He did make a couple of awesome improvisational plays, throwing the ball on the run and delivering it with velocity and accuracy. That little flip to DeAndre Swift, that's a quarterback. That's a play that I know it looks simple, but that's not a play that every quarterback in the league can make. Caleb Williams is going to be an absolute star.
Yeah.
The Bears have surrounded him with a ton of talent. I think he's going to be great right off the bat.
I think on base, I just want to say when you're comparing those two guys, like the base outcome is Caleb Williams will score more fantasy points than Jaden Daniels this year. On ceiling, Jaden Daniels can hit way higher because of the rushing ability. But if you just ask me,
if Jaden Daniels, scores 10 rushing touchdowns,
right,
like
it's over.
over.
Yeah, exactly.
The tight end situation is interesting. Cole Kmet is making, a decent chunk of change, but Shane Waldron, the Bears' new offensive coordinator, coached Gerald Everett for his entire Rams career.
Yep.
And with the Seahawks.
Yep.
So, he has a special level of familiarity with Gerald Everett. And right now, I'm expecting them to form a rotation. And at the end of the day, this is going to be a 3-receiver, 11 personnel offense because they use the number 9 pick on Rome Odunze, traded for Keenan Allen, have DJ Moore, who's a top 5 receiver last year. So, everybody can't play all the time.
Yeah.
And so this is a really big issue for Cole Kmet. He's no longer in the top 150.
All right. Let's get to some Chiefs stuff here. So Mahomes only played 6 snaps as expected, but just wanted to reiterate, Isiah Pacheco's role without Jerick McKinnon is awesome. Isiah Pacheco played all 6 snaps from Mahomes, including the third down. We are up in the ETR ranks to 30th overall on Isiah Pacheco at this point. Evan is at 45 overall. So we're pretty significantly higher on Pacheco than Evan here. And then the other thing is they still have no RB2. They're trying out some guy I literally never heard of. Carson Steele is like supposed to getting run now as the RB2. They tried Deneric Prince there. CH is having all kinds of problems. I haven't heard any McKinnon rumors lately. So yeah, Evan, any thoughts on the Pacheco and rest of running back stuff for the Chiefs?
Yeah, I just submitted the Chiefs team preview and was very, very positive about Isiah Pacheco. Maybe I got to move him up. You guys are at 30 overall. I mean, that's like a locked in third round pick.
Yeah.
I have him more towards the third, fourth round fringe. But yeah, I mean, he's going to get the ball a lot. Like he has made advancements in terms of his passing game ability. He runs so hard and with a unique style. And if you look at just the game logs from last year, especially in the playoffs, he was coming off shoulder surgery at the time, and they fed the bejesus out of him in the playoffs, and with success. So yeah, I probably need to come up on him. I'm going to do a full look over of the 150 actually right after we get off of this, and I'll make sure I'll make a note to move him up. But Carson Steele, yeah. So they wanted to give Deneric Prince this opportunity, and I'm not sure that he's running away with it. Now Carson Steele has been getting first and second team reps. I got to be honest, I did not know very much about Carson Steele before this training camp, and that's because he had a very nondescript college career, bouncing between Ball State and UCLA. He was not. He had a ton of rushing production in his second season at Ball State. Goes to UCLA. I mean, he was never like super efficient, and then he goes undrafted. He ran 4.77 at what I believe a little over 220 pounds at the combine. That's gonna wipe you off the like. Some services listed him as a fullback.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I mean, and then Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I mean, I think the book has been written on him.
Yeah.
And I hope that everything goes well for him, from a mental standpoint, because I know he's been struggling with that. But I mean, we've seen him as an NFL player, and he's not a quality NFL player. I think that they're a team that will be looking to add when cuts come down. So I wouldn't write in anything there for the number 2 back spot in Kansas City.
Exactly. And that's the danger with taking a round 2 or early round 3 on Pacheco. If they sign McKinnon, if they sign someone else to play a bunch of pass downs in 2 minutes, that's obviously not great for Pacheco. I think he will need at least some of that pass down work to pay off in the second round. But yeah, the way it stands now, super excited about Pacheco. Let's go to Packers stuff. So Marshawn Lloyd gets in the preseason game, pulls his hamstring. Now, he had a hip issue earlier. This hamstring thing could be related. He said that he's been playing through the hamstring, and he pulled it in the game. A.J. Dillon played poorly, as we expect him to do in the preseason game. It's just the part of the thesis on Marshawn Lloyd was that he would ice A.J. Dillon would get cut, and Marshawn Lloyd would be in that 1B role. Now, I can't say that. He hasn't been on the field to compete for that. So we dropped Marshawn Lloyd down to 179 overall. I still prefer Marshawn Lloyd to A.J. Dillon. But all this kind of makes me feel better about Evan's boy, Josh Jacobs, who we now have at 35 overall. So really rough rookie camp here for Marshawn Lloyd. Evan, any more thoughts on Packers backfield?
Yeah, and again, this is a player that I really liked. I mean, I really liked him as a prospect, big time speed score player. I think he ran 4.45 at 220 pounds. Can catch the football. Was a lot of fun to watch at USC, and I drafted him in a dynasty league, and I took him over Blake Corum, and now I'm like hating myself for that. Yeah. And he just looks like a terrible pick in hindsight. But I mean, there's nothing really else to say. Like he has not captured. I mean, he hasn't even put himself in a position to have an opportunity to capture some sort of a role. And yeah, I think that Josh Jacobs is going to enter the season as one of the NFL's premier workhorses in an offense with an upward trajectory. Dontavian Wicks ran as the number 4 receiver in the Packers opening preseason game. But, man, he got big-time separation and caught a 65-yard touchdown pass from Jordan Love. I'm hanging on to him as one of my favorite sleepers. It is discouraging to see him running in that number 4 role, and he's been there all camp. But I think at some point, like somebody's going to go down or something, and he's going to hop in there and he's going to run away. I think he's the most talented Packers receiver.
To be clear, when Evan says number 4 wide receiver, they only got 3 snaps off. Let me tell you what happened on those 3 snaps that the Packers ran. The very first snap of the game, the Packers were in a 3 wide receiver set. It was Romeo Doubs, Christian Watson on the outside, Jaden Reed in the slot. The second snap of the game, they go to a 2 wide receiver set. Remove Jaden Reed from the field. It's Doubs and Christian Watson. Then they go back to a 3 wide receiver set for the third play of the game, and it's Doubs and it's Wicks instead of Watson, and it's Reed in the slot. And so that's when he catches the touchdown. And I guess my point is, I kind of think that's how it's going to play during the regular season. Doubs is going to play almost every snap. Jaden Reed's going to be in all 3 wide receiver sets. Then there'll be some rotation between Christian Watson and Dontavian Wicks. And yeah, they're never going to project.
It's what makes the most sense too, because you want to get Wicks on the field, but you also want to manage Christian Watson and not have him pulling his hamstrings all over the place again.
From a projection standpoint, no one's going to look good in those scenarios, right? Like when we're projecting guys to be part-time players and a lot of talented guys can earn targets, because we haven't even talked about the tight ends and the running backs, et cetera. So it's not going to project well, but it clearly, as Wicks showed in this game, it can still hit. So yeah. Let's go to Rams. Small one here. Just confirmation. Colby Parkinson rested in this game. We know Sean McVay never plays starters in the preseason. Again, Colby Parkinson rested with the rest of the starters. Davis Allen played 23 snaps. So I think that competition is toast, decided. It's Colby Parkinson's job. We're up to tight end 26 on Colby Parkinson, right around Isaiah Likely and Ben Sinnott in the rankings. I don't believe Evan has Parkinson in the top 150, and I think that's totally fair. But yeah, any more thoughts on Parkinson? I know we've talked about this before. This is just confirmation.
Yeah, there's only 14 or 15 tight ends in the top 150. Yeah, I'll go back and look at where I have him in the tiers, but yeah, he's iced that. I think he's going to play a lot. We talked about him. He's 6'7". They gave him a 3-year, $23 million deal. He can block. I mean, he could end up playing a lot. I mean, he could end up playing over 80% of the snaps because they play so much 3 receivers and they're only going to have 1 tight end on the field. I mean, he's a decent little sleeper. I mean, he should be on sleepers list for sure.
100%. I mean, I think he's easily going to play 80% of the snaps to start here in week 1. Tyler Higbee will maybe be back at some point. He's 7 months removed from his ACL tear right now. Speaking of dusty tight ends, Chig Okonkwo, only 8 of 14 snaps with the Will Levis group. Some other dusty tight ends got the other snaps. I still think Chig is an athletic guy. It would just surprise me if he broke out at this point. It would surprise me. And it seems like the Titans don't even love him that much. I don't think Chig is in the top 150. No, he's not in the top 150 either there. So I'm not too interested in him. I've been taking more Parkinson than Chig, I would say right now.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like they like Josh Weil, who was their 5th round pick a year ago. And it's going to be a rotation between Chig and Josh Weil.
Yeah, Josh Weil played 7 snaps with the starters. Chig played 8. Braelon Allen, this guy we've been talking about for 3 or 4 months now. I feel like ever since the draft. But Braelon Allen did what he's been doing in practice. He went into the game and just ripped 6 carries, 54 yards, no touchdowns. I don't care too much about that, but it's clear the Jets really like him. And I think at this point, it is completely iced. Braelon Allen will be the RB2 behind Breece Hall. I saw some people saying Braelon Allen is so big and strong, he should be the goal line back over Breece Hall. I don't think that is really in play, but I'm curious if you think there's any standalone value at all for Braelon Allen, Evan, or is this strictly a handcuff situation?
Yeah, I think it'll be tough because, I mean, you don't want to take Breece Hall off the field because he's so dynamic in every phase. But Braelon Allen is one of the – and you were really early on this. So props to you that he already pegged down the number 2 running back job for the Jets. He was kind of considered a work in progress to an extent because he played linebacker. He's a converted linebacker, but he came into camp, looks awesome. He's 235 pounds. His first preseason game, those 6 carries, he was super impressive. You get him on the second level. I mean, I don't want to compare him to Derrick Henry, but I mean, there's some serious power. It hurts to tackle this guy.
I mean,
I think that there are, some later game situations where maybe if the Jets are up by 17, you might see a drive or two of Braelon Allen. But he looked awesome.
Yeah.
He's one of the best handcuffs right now in fantasy. I moved him into the 150s, like 134 or something.
Yeah. Evan, 133 for Evan on Braelon Allen. Another thing I keep going back to, when he was 17 years old in the Big Ten for Wisconsin, 186 carries, 1,268 yards, 12 touchdowns at 17 years old. That just like boggles my mind. I mean, really does. So super impressive guy. Let's go to a move Silva made in the top 150. Silva goes from on Khalil Shakir, wide receiver 59, all the way up to wide receiver 49. I continue to struggle with Bills wide receivers and what the rotation is going to look like. Generally, highly recommend people read Joe Buscaglia in The Athletic. He's been on top of this. He knows fantasy players are reading all this stuff that he says. Evan, why the move on Khalil Shakir up 10 spots in the wide receiver ranks?
Well, the way that I had kind of like seen it to this point was that there's just going to be like, a wide ranging rotation. Matt Collins is going to end up playing more than anybody anticipates in that old Gabe Davis wind sprint role. Keon Coleman, I think, will get more and more as the season progresses, but might start out a little bit slow. Khalil Shakir, he's like a rotational slot receiver, but I think that Khalil Shakir is going to end up leading the team in snaps and the position group in snaps and targets. And I was listening to, our old friend Greg Rosenthal doing their for NFL Daily, his new podcast, and they were doing their AFC East preview, and he suggested that Khalil Shakir might be a player who catches 90 to 100 balls this year, and it just kind of flipped on. I was like, man, I could kind of see that. I think he's a good player, number one. And I think indications from the first preseason game are that he is going to be like the number one receiver in terms of playing time, that he's not going to be he's going to be the least rotational receiver of the group. I still only have him at wide receiver 49. I mean, I'm not going crazy on him or anything.
Yeah.
But before he was not like a target, like a draft target. And now at least he's in a range where if you want him, like he's right there.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of Curtis Samuel slappies out there. Evan has Shakir and Curtis Samuel back-to-back. Shakir one spot ahead. On ADP, Shakir is going late. I mean, 140 overall is the home league ADP on Shakir right now. I think that's a buy for me there. And yeah, one other point I wanted to make on the rotation stuff. Matt Collins did not play in this game. Keon Coleman played every snap with the Josh Allen group. I don't know that's going to be sticky for Keon Coleman when Matt Collins comes back, to Evan's point. So certainly we'll be watching that the rest of the preseason. Arizona, Trey Benson got 0 third downs in this game, even though James Conner didn't play. I also saw some tape bros who did not like the way Trey Benson ran in this game. It's been not the greatest vibes on Trey Benson since training camp started, sharing snaps with some dust balls like Amari DiMercado and stuff like that. I've backed off taking Trey Benson a bunch. I'm just worried what's his role if he's not going to play pass downs and James Conner is going to be out there a ton. Evan, any thoughts on Trey Benson coming out of this preseason game?
Well, for a player that averaged over 6 yards per carry and over 11 yards per reception in college, like this was pretty discouraging if you want to be microscopic and break down every touch that Trey Benson got in this game, because it was brutal. I mean, he looked extremely tentative. He looked slow.
Yeah.
I look, it's his first NFL experience, and maybe he was nervous or something, but he looked brutally bad. I didn't want to overreact and move him down off of that because I don't think anything has really changed. But if you want to be microscopic with this, I mean, you have to be discouraged. That did not look good.
I do not think that drawing any conclusions from the way someone performs in a preseason game.
I mean, in his next game, he could, he's got speed. Like he could break a 7-yard run. Like,
right. I mean, one better block from an offensive lineman, and no one is sitting here saying he looks slow because he's in the second level. So I'm not going to overreact to that. I am worried, though, that he didn't play on any third downs, and we know James Conner is going to be out there for the overall majority of first and second downs. So then what is Trey Benson's role? So
Trey Benson is basically a bet that James Conner is not going to be able to stay healthy like he did last year, and like he hasn't been able to for the vast majority of his career. I think that's what he's also, Trey Benson was a second-round pick.
Yeah.
Or early third, I think.
Yeah.
66th overall, if I recall correctly. I mean, he was drafted pretty high, but again, I mean, he's got to look better than that.
All right, 2 more quick stories to wrap up here. A lot of speculation out of San Francisco that Jordan Mason is the favorite over Eli Mitchell to be the RB2. My take is that if something happened to Christian McCaffrey, And by the way, it sounds like his calf is fine. I believe Evan moved him back up to number 1 overall. Yes, Evan did move Christian McCaffrey back up number 1 overall. If something were to happen to Christian McCaffrey this season, I kind of think that we would see both Mason and Eli Mitchell kind of share it a little bit, but I don't feel strongly about that. Evan, what do you think about handcuffing behind CMC right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think I got Mitchell out of the top 150.
Yeah.
If
Yes.
he's still in there, he's really late.
Both of them are out. No Mason or Mitchell for
Yeah.
Evan in the top 150.
So I'm kind of throwing up my hands there. I don't know. I mean, Eli Mitchell has been out. He has been
Yeah.
injured,
As always.
as always. And Jordan Mason, who was a player that like their running backs coach Bobby Turner, who by the way has been, he was a running backs coach for Mike Shanahan's Broncos. I mean, that far back away. By the way, Mike Shanahan belongs in the Hall of Fame. Bobby Turner was talking about how Jordan Mason, when he came into the league, he was really immature and all this, earned his way on special teams. And now he's taking the next step from a maturity standpoint. And I mean, he's got some talent as a ball carrier, and he's gotten a lot of opportunities because Isaac Garendo
Yep.
and Eli Mitchell have been hurt. Obviously now Christian McCaffrey has been hurt. So he's got this opportunity. He's been running with it. I don't know if I'd rush out to draft either guy.
Yeah.
And that's why neither of those guys are in the top 150. But I mean, this is a training camp battle that has become significant when I think we both opened training camp expecting Eli Mitchell to run away with it.
Yep, for sure. And I've been drafting some late Eli Mitchell. I think we talked before about how I've been backing off of that and do take Mason a little bit now and some round 20 type stuff. Last story, not really a fantasy relevant story, but did want to pour one out for Juju Smith-Schuster. Juju Smith-Schuster, he of Pittsburgh fame at age 21 was like the number 1 dynasty player in all of fantasy football because at age 21, he caught 111 balls for 1,426 yards and 7 touchdowns. Fast forward to age 27, and he's probably out of the league. I mean, he just like can't play. I know he's had knee issues. I know people blame the TikTok and stuff like that, but just a very rapid fall from grace for a receiver who tore the league up at age 21. Evan, any reaction to the Patriots cutting Juju Smith-Schuster?
I think it's definitely TikTok to blame. I think we can leave it at that. I don't think we're going to see Juju Smith-Schuster play another snap in the NFL, and his demise correlates perfectly with his time to when he became a TikTok star. But I'm sure he's doing well. I'm not on TikTok, but I'm sure he's doing well in that field, and I wish the best to him.
I do not take many Patriots at all. I'm just so worried that this team is going to be total dust. Offensive line play, quarterback play. Polk has gotten expensive. I was thinking some Polk before he got expensive. Polk and Pop Douglas would be the two that I would still consider, but I'm not excited to click, either one here. And I don't think the Juju stuff changes anything. We did not have many targets projected for Juju anyways. All right. I know that was a busy show. Hopefully you guys all got caught up on what's been going on and what matters from the league over the last week. We will try to do these news and rankings change shows once a week until week 1 hits. Do not forget preseason slate coming up Thursday, big one on Saturday. Check that out. Also, NFL Draft Kit, NFL In Season are both up on the subscribe page right now. Head to establishtheRun.com for more. Oh, and also, Evan and Daigle have been grinding hard on the team previews. Be sure you check those out. If you're kind of just catching up in the NFL, I think those team previews are a great way to get caught up on what's going on with each team. For Evan, Brucer Luke, Brucer Ryan, I am indeed Adam. Good luck, everybody.